Hi, I'm standing on Folly Bridge again, 2 days after I made the video where I walked from Folly Bridge down Abingdon Road to Donnington Bridge. And I'm going to do part of the same walk again. There's something I noticed on a map when I was processing the video that I want to look for today. Since I videoed Abingdon Road 2 days ago, I won't do that again. I think you might find it boring. So I'm going to cut now and rejoin near the bottom of Abingdon Road. Okay, well, it's me again. I'm now near the bottom of the Abingdon Road, and the garish red and yellow building over on the other side of the road, the tyre centre, is always a dead giveaway for this part of the area. And I'm going to walk down the Abingdon Road as I did yesterday, but then instead of turning onto Donnington Bridge Road, I'll continue straight on past the Tesco Express and into one of the side streets on the left. It's a much nicer day than yesterday. Now, it was pretty gloomy this morning. Nobody has swept the pavement, and there's still the horse dung that was there. And these are the flowers I pointed at outside the allotments. So if I am walking this way for my own enjoyment, I normally turn off here because it's quieter than going down Donny Bridge Road. But today I'm going to carry straight on. Showing you reaches of the Abingdon Road that you won't have seen before. At least not on my videos. There's a Tesco Express and the Donnington Bridge Road is on the left. You'll remember I did a video where I walked down the Abingdon Road, then intended to go down this route, but it was such a nice morning that I diverted through South Hinksey Park instead, went through South Hinksey and then up to the Chilswell Trail and over the ridge along the bridge rather, and then down through North Hinckley. I do that route quite often in the summer, and when I did it, you may have seen some seats. Sorry to interrupt. City planners, please look at this and take notice. The crossing is useless, and there's an even more useless one to Hinksey Hill. Over there. Anyway, I do the route to Chillswell along the ridge of the hill and down back through North Hinksey quite often, and you may remember that there were several seats at the top of the trail, and it's very nice just to sit there and watch the view over Hinksey Hill, the big posh houses and the valley. And on one occasion I went in here, Tesco Express that is, and bought a giant size trifle, which I think cost £2.75 or thereabouts. Raspberry, strawberry and lots of cream. And I took that up through South Hinksey and up onto the top, and sat happily eating it while looking out over Hinksey Hill. So that's a nice thing to do, though probably not too often. I'm not going to go to the car wash because I don't have a car. I'm going to go past it. That's a turning off into Canning Crescent, which goes round to the left and comes out on Donnington Bridge Road. In Monday's video, I stood on one of the weirs looking through a gap in the foliage over some water. I think it was Weir's Mill Stream, and towards the back of a house, probably round about number 11 or so, I'm guessing. Very spectacular view, and I envy the people who actually have the house, because they've got an equally nice view in the other direction. In fact, they've got a nicer view because you can't see their house. Anyway, I'm not going to go here. I think I want the next turning on the left. If you go straight down there, there's the Park and Ride bus station on the right, and then various routes to Kennington, which is the next village south of Oxford. And unlike some of the villages, it does count as a separate entity. I don't think it's legally part of Oxford. And there are various walks from there along the river and various other routes south for quite a way. Okay, now I think I can... Gordon Woodward, that's what I want. I want to get to Leander Way. Leander Way. And I think that must be what I want. I saw this mentioned on a map when I was looking up maps of the Weirs Mill stream area to put links to on the last video description. And one of the things I noticed there was a seed sculpture. I googled seed sculpture and I found various other seed sculptures, most of which appear to be made to look like seeds rather than being made out of seeds. And from the terrain map that I saw of this one, this must be it. Anyone any good at identifying seeds? If one is sensitive to shapes, it's always nice just to stop and view something like this from different angles. I notice it has a few little seedlings growing in it. Personally, I think it's more evocative from the broad side rather than the end. That may be because subconsciously it activates bits of the brain in me that recognise mouths. Facial pareidolia, it's called, the tendency to see faces where there aren't any. And I notice also that the inverse of the seed has been kept or made. I'm not saying that it was necessarily used to form the seed, just that it looks like an inverse. So that is the Leander Way seed sculpture. And this is private land. I think these are some kind of rehabilitation centre, possibly for people with visual problems. Now, can I get out? Looks though I might be able to see a narrow boat. No, that bet that flows around the back of Canning Crescent, but I don't see a way out along here unless I swim, which I'm not going to do. Nice view though. So I need to go back. I think what I'll do is to go back along Leander Way, then onto Canning Crescent, then round onto Donnington Bridge Road, and then I'll continue the walk that I was going to do on Monday, but couldn't because it started raining and I was worried about rain getting into my phone. And just to mention, there's an Isis close, which must be named after the Isis, which is the local name for this section of the Thames. So the question is, Isis close is obvious, but why Leander Way? And it could be something to do with a much larger watercourse, namely the Hellespont, as it was called in ancient Greek, now the Dardanelles, because there's a Greek myth, it probably goes back a lot longer, of Hero and Leander. Hero was a priest of Aphrodite, a sort of Greek equivalent to Venus, who lived in a city, Sestos, on the northwest side of the Hellespont or the Dardanelles. And Leander was a man who lived on the southeast side of the strait. And to get some geography, if you look at a map, Turkey appears as a long horizontal rectangle, roughly speaking, with the Aegean Sea at the bottom left. So the Aegean Sea has the Turkey rectangle at its top right, roughly. And there's a narrow strait going diagonally right and upwards, which goes from the Aegean through the bottom left of Turkey and to the Sea of Marmara. That's the Hellespont or the Dardanelles. And Sestos is a city that's on its top left, the northwest side, and Abydos is a city that is on the south-east side, the bottom right. And they're separated, as far as I can work out from Google Maps, by something like 1 to 2 kilometres of water. And this is relevant because it seems that Hero and Leander loved each other very much. As I say, Hero was a priestess and Leander was a man. I think they met when Leander was making obeisances, or, well, let's just say praying or something similar to Aphrodite. They met in the temple. And things developed so that over the summer, Hero would swim from his city across the Hellespont 1 to 2 kilometres every night to meet Leander would swim across the Hellespont to meet Hero, and they'd do whatever they did during the night, and then Leander would swim back, and he'd do so in the dark, so presumably not to be noticed, and get back to his residence in Abydos. And Hero put a light, it must have been a very powerful light, to reach 1 to 2 kilometres at the top of the tower to guide him. And they did this every day during the summer, but then gave it up when the weather got stormy and the summer ended. But one day Leander noticed the light. This was in the middle of winter, and it was stormy, and he started swimming, and the light went out halfway, and I think he drowned, as lovers have a way of doing. And I think what happened then is that Hero was so upset that she jumped out of the tower, or at least jumped into the Hellespont, and drowned as well. And there are lots of paintings of this and poems about it and so on, and it probably goes back a lot further than ancient Greece. Universal theme. So it might be that Leander Way commemorates, though I don't know why. Or it could just be somebody whose surname or whose Christian name was Leander, I suppose. So anyway, that's the story of Hero and Leander. It always confuses me because knowing modern Greek, I'd expect a female's name to end with an A rather than an O. Right, this is Canning Crescent, And I'm going to come out onto Donnington Bridge Road. I'm going to walk over the minor span of the bridge that crosses Wears Mill Stream, which is a sort of offshoot of the Thames. And then a little bit later I'll cross the main span of the bridge that crosses the main branch of the Thames. That is the field that I came out of on Monday back onto this road. This is the main span of Donnington Bridge. this path slopes gently down and round to the Thames footpath. That is a shorter path which I don't particularly recommend using. That is the Thames with some rowers. Down there, if you walk along the towpath, you get to Iffley Lock and Iffley Village, and you pass the place where the rowing started on Saturday of Eights week, and you can continue walking through Kennington, then to Sandford-on-Thames, say, where there's a nice pub called the King's Arms. And in fact you can walk even further to Radley and Abingdon, and if you go even further all the way to London, just about all of the Thames side has been made passable now, legally accessible for people to walk through. That path on the right it continues right for a bit and then bends sharp left and goes up a slight hill into Iffley Village. If you want refreshments, there's I think it counts as two pubs, the Tree House and the Prince of Wales. And there's a village shop which is open until about 4 o'clock most of the days. Meadow Lane. This continues Meadow Lane in the other direction and goes round the back of Iffley Road. If you follow it to its end, you'll come to a path on the right up a slight slope that borders some new buildings and goes on to Iffley Road, but there are a few other side streets before that as well. And I think there's a nature reserve on the left, the Kidneys. There's a community centre at the end of Donnington Bridge Road on the right, which sometimes has events. Thoroughly rain damaged, unfortunately. I do wonder why these estates were built without shops and cafes. In Portugal, in Portugal, just about every block of flats that I've ever seen built has a space for a cafe on the ground floor, and you'd probably find one Donington Bridge Community Centre events, but they're well out of date. You'll probably find one in the equivalent of most housing estates too. The planners seem to think of the British as much more isolated. Okay, well that just cut off a bit of traffic noise from quite a noisy part of Donnington Bridge Road. I'm now going to come out onto Iffley Road. Which, to give it its credit, does have a few more shops down here. I was going to say that it's nice to see that a lot of residents have kept their gardens rather than paving them over, but I've just been shown wrong. And there. And there. Though not there. I don't know where this love for getting rid of plants comes from. I'm not sure Britain has been termed a nation of gardeners, but I don't think you could say any more that it is. And I once felt that very acutely. I was in Cornmarket Street in Oxford, listening to one of the buskers, and there was a huge bumblebee crawling around on the ground. It looked sort of partly stunned. It was weaving a bit and not doing anything particularly sensible. So it didn't look as though it was in a state to get anywhere useful to it. So I managed to get it into an abandoned paper coffee cup. And then I started carrying it, looking for some suitably luxuriant greenery to put it onto and let it recover. And it took me about 15 minutes before I could find anywhere. I had to get out of Cornmarket and out of George Street, which is the next street along. And then I got into Jericho, which struck me as the nearest reasonably green area. But so many of the gardens were paved over that this wasn't at all useful. In the end, I crossed a canal bridge and deposited the bee in a rose garden that somebody had built or cultivated on the edge of the canal. The love of flowers in Oxford doesn't go very far. Not saying anything. Somebody is really, really worried about their breath. I'm going to take this to somebody I know who sells such things. It might be useful to them. I'm not an expert, but it looks old enough to be interesting and still in fairly good condition. Pretty hefty, actually. Right. Let's go. Laat ons maar gaan. So this is Iffley Road, pointing towards the city centre by summer afternoon sunlight. That's a bread shop which sells so-called artisanal sourdough and such like. I think it's only open Thursday, Friday and Saturday. And there's at least one other bread shop round the corner at a place that also sells locally ground coffee. Magdalen Road. So I came up here last time I did the walk. Let's see whether anything has changed. It looks pretty similar. That's a youth theatre. Gym. That's one of the coffee roasters, and yep, they do bread. Just about. See some baked goods at the back. And that place sells coffee too, and it's advertising cakes. And I think they told me that they sell bread too. Green Route, which is be a horrible pun. That is Stanley Road, where the mosque that we ended up at during the interfaith walk is. Just round the corner. That's one of many Middle Eastern shops that we find around the area, normally on Cowley Road. I just do not want to think about what is in those, not just the sugar and artificial sweeteners, but the percentage of caffeine. I drink coffee, but I'm careful not to drink too much, and I know roughly what my tolerance is in terms of numbers of cups of cappuccino. But if you buy cans of these weird artificial energy concoctions, how on earth do you know how much caffeine you're taking in? Or how long it's going to take you to get rid of it. And it can be very upsetting to the system. I was in London once and I bought some chocolate-covered coffee beans at a place in, I think it was Morton Street, off Seven Dials. An old coffee roastery, and I gave them to a friend of mine, and he ate rather too many and couldn't get to sleep for the entire night. Well, last time I turned down St Mary's Road. This time, just for a change, I'm going to continue up this road and get onto Cowley Road at the top, and then turn left and then walk back to the city centre. this general area between the Iffley and Cowley Roads used to be known as Bedsit Triangle because of the number of houses that were rented by students. Don't know whether it still is. The colleges have probably built themselves more accommodation since. That is local Art Deco, I suppose. I think it started life as a cinema, presumably called the Regal, and it's been a bingo hall, I think, at various times, and I think probably for the past 10 or maybe even 20 years it's been used It's been used by one or more Christian organisations. I'm not sure they've always been the Christian Life Centre. Right, I'm now coming onto Cowley Road. This is the end of what you might call the residential or suburban bit. There's a biggish shopping centre called Temple Cowley, some way up there and to the right. But most of what's on Cowley Road itself, from here eastward, is houses. One or two shops, a police station and so on, but mainly houses. This branch, or rather this side, is quite different. And it has a vibe quite unlike most other parts of Oxford, in fact probably all other parts of Oxford. Somebody told me that the nearest equivalent in Cambridge is Mill Street. As I said earlier, lots of Middle Eastern shops. I'm using the term rather loosely, but you know what I mean. Moroccan, Indian, Lebanese, so on. Mixtures of products, Turkish. Lots of shops with produce from these countries and lots of restaurants. For a time, the main kind of restaurant on Cowley Road was, I suppose, Indian and one or two Chinese. Then it turned towards being the sort of place that would sell falafels and hummus and meat kebabs done in a Middle Eastern style. And now I think it's changing again. I think there's a Korean restaurant somewhere. There's certainly a Korean supermarket. There's a Oriental supermarket, probably a ramen bar or two. I'm being rather vague here, but I haven't sat down and counted the shops. One place that is missed is the Excelsior. That was a greasy spoon cafe that had been there, I think, since the 60s, and it was run by Cypriots who'd come over at that time. They sold the best coffee in Oxford. They had an old Gaggia cappuccino machine, a hulking red thing with a long lever that you pulled that released clouds of steam that you had to manually foam milk with from a jug. It was not only the best tasting coffee, but the strongest. They also had a very eclectic collection of clientele, many of whom would spend most of their days in the cafe because they had nowhere else to go, mental health provision in Oxford being what it is. In fact, the Excelsior got recognised, as it were. It got an award, I think, from either the council or one of the local mental health organisations, or both, for 50 years service to such people, which is very nice. And I heard after that the owner used to make evening visits to some of the customers' houses or customers' residences to check that they were okay. So that's a typical display for this kind of shop. I must say a nice juicy watermelon would go down very well now. Well, there can't be many of these left. I don't suppose there are many displays like this.
Toz ne?
Bike shop used by many of the cyclists here. Bar devoted entirely to ice cream and sundaes. Very nice, but they have to scrape you off the ceiling if you eat too many of them. Now, I didn't know about that. That's new, I think. And African restaurant. African seafood too. I've never been to one of those. Well, that's the Oriental supermarket that I mentioned. I'm too close to photograph it properly. Japanese. That's fairly new too. Zanetta Lijnova. That's one of the Slavic languages. I think there's a hairdresser. Moroccan and Lebanese fusion, Lakesh. They've been around for quite a few years. As has the rice box. Brazilian grocers. Given the closure of the Aqui down Abingdon Road, I'd like them to do Portuguese goods as well, but I don't think they do. They've also been here for quite a long time, though not quite as long as Lakesh. Lebanese, I think.
Let's explain we just had food. Okay. So if you see any
There's a funny sort of sourish, I can't really describe it, sourish powder used by some Middle Eastern cuisines called za'atar, and the name may be a reference to that. They, I think, are the original Middle Eastern shop. They sell mainly Indian and Pakistani goods, and I think they were here before any of the others, and they may even have stimulated some of the other businesses to set up here, in which case all good to them. Eastern and Continental store. One thing they sell is those horrendously sticky milk-based Indian sweets.
Excuse me, do you happen to have this, sir? Sir?
Now, has this one stopped business, or is it still outfitting? Looks as though it's stopped. I have a feeling they might have been Syrian. I think they're new too. Caribou Cafe, Zanzibar.
I can't see a bus coming.
That is about as garish as the tyre centre that I pointed out in Abingdon Road. All yellow and red. Cowley Road has its share of derelict shops, and there's one of them. As I said earlier, Cowley Road had a lot of Indian restaurants at one time. I think many of them have now gone, but here's one that is still going. George and Delilah, there are 3 ice cream. There are 3 branches of what everybody calls G&D. That's the Cowley Road one. There's one in St Aldate's and there's one in Little Clarendon Street. You sometimes see their staff wandering around dressed as cows, handing out advertising. And they're notable in Oxford because most of the cafes close quite early, and G&Ds tend to stay up until 11 or so. Baltic food, including Russian. I'm not sure whether that technically counts as Baltic, but you can buy Russian brands here. Nice place to buy Christmas presents. Russian and Polish decorated sort of pop-up paper houses with chocolates in. And if you want to learn the languages, it's also a good place to buy newspapers and other reading material. You'll probably have noticed that my motion is quite jerky walking along Cowley Road, but it's very crowded and you have to be constantly aware for people cycling on the pavement or for lorries overhanging the pavement and that sort of thing. So it's difficult to keep all my attention on either the camera screen or the things that I'm videoing. Mac Kitten's coffee shop. With some unique cat. And this is a sort of Korean food supermarket. They also sell some Japanese and Chinese goods. Big Indian sort of warehouse style retailer. This must be one of the longest running businesses and may even have started before the Eastern and Continental stores. The Bombay Emporium. Clothing, fabrics, giftware and more, it says. They don't sell food. They sell incense. They sell rolls of Indian fabric, the sort of stuff that saris are made of. And they sell Indian clothes, shirts, baggy trousers, saris, scarves, ponchos. Okay, ponchos aren't Indian, but they did used to sell quite a lot of them from one of the South American suppliers. Very colourful. I did buy some of the shirts once, and they were a very, very striking turquoise that I've never seen anywhere else. Then I washed them, and they turned to a somewhat acid sort of pea green. When I told the shop, they said that I should have added salt to the wash water. I think I then tried one of the ones that I had left with salt, and it turned the same colour anyway. So, very sorry, Bombay Emporium. I like your stuff, but I've not bought any more of your shirts because I wanted them to stay the same colour. Now I'm on St Clement's, and I'm very shortly going to be on Oxford High Street. Well, that's very tempting. This one never seems to be open. I don't know whether it's officially closed, but I just never seen anybody in it, or cooking in it, or entering it, or eating in it. And just like that, the vibe changes. Well, Sainsbury's, I have an idea. How about not putting up your prices so much? It wasn't Sainsbury's actually, but I noticed that the Co-op have started attaching security tags to the lids of coffee jars so that they bleep if you take them out of the shop without an assistant deactivating them. And actually, Sainsbury's have started doing the same with cheese. And when the supermarkets are putting up prices so much that sort of thing happens, they really ought to think again. But I'm sure their shareholders are enjoying it. Now crossing Magdalen Bridge. Nice meadow down there, though it can be very boggy in unsuspected places. Now this is going to be a good test case. There's a strong westerly wind blowing straight at me. Strong enough that I can hear it sort of thumping around in my ears. And my first few videos have patches on that were spoilt by wind noise in the phone's microphone. You can get things called dead cats to fit over the microphone, and for a phone these would look like a little rectangular bag or purse with an elasticated top and vast amounts of rather spiky fur. Think of a Persian cat, or more accurately think of a Persian cat that's been using hair gel, with the fur sticking out from the purse, and this fits over the base of the phone, and the fur prevents eddies. I think that's the explanation. Air currents around the microphone. The cheapest one I've been able to find is £25, and I couldn't find one in any shop that I was actually able to visit. And buying one online, I wasn't quite sure that it would fit my phone, but I made a much cheaper version which has worked pretty well with every video since I made it. And very simply, it used a tube of glue, which I already had, and a bag of cotton wool balls. Total cost £2.25 from Sainsbury's pharmacy section. And the experiment shows that the microphone segments or microphone sensors that are used on this particular iPhone are on the base of the phone, not at the top. So I covered or touched some bits of the phone that weren't doing anything with Yoo-hoo, let it just go very slightly tacky, and then pressed a cotton wool ball around each microphone so that the glue held it. Put a heavy weight on the lot so that there'd be pressure while the glue was setting, and that's what I have on the phone now. And for every video since, it seems to have been fine. I probably have to speak a little bit louder than I did, but that's no bad thing anyway. I'll see how it comes out this time. Right, so I'm now on Oxford High Street. And this is one of the most recognised views. I'm sure many people would be able to tell you which city this is, even if they didn't live in Oxford. That curve of street and the spire and the tree. Queen's Lane Coffee House, which claims to be the oldest established coffee house in Europe. Queen's Lane.
I don't want to sound rude, but you look all dancing.
I was probably very proud.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm wearing a sort of cravat thing to
Show up 10 minutes late every day.
give a bit of extra air, and I thought for a moment that the wind had blown it off,
And then
but I still have it.
for 50 minutes. I worry for that child.
This is like being trampled to death by a herd of wildebeest. Only they're tourists. Okay, well, I'm going to end shortly. I'm pretty close to Carfax, the centre of Oxford. It's been a mixture of things that are nice to look at and things that in a conventional sense are not quite so nice to look at. But the entire walk hasn't really taken all that long, and I hope if people haven't already tried such routes, this will encourage them to do so and explore the city and the countryside. Past 4. And even the high street isn't immune from closed shops. That Space NK I'm fairly sure they've been closed since the start of the pandemic. The one on their right, likewise, can't even remember what it was. I think it might have sold antique maps. And then the shop to the right of that, which the bus will obscure from view in a moment, I think that was the Oxford University Press, presumably now just selling their books online. They've been closed for quite a time too, and I really would have thought that somebody with the clout of Oxford University could have found an occupant or found something useful to do with the shop. There.
Very close. There we go.
You may have come across a puzzle called the 15 game. It's a square frame which holds 15, well it's got spaces for 16 little squares, each one a quarter of the size of the frame on a side, but it only has 15 squares, so there's one hole left, and you have to move squares around to, as it were, push the hole from one position to another. So it's a sort of game of moving amidst many obstructions. And I do think that one could build something very similar. Instead of a square frame, you'd have a long, skinny rectangular frame. And instead of numbered squares, you'd have buses. And yes, I know it's quiet at the moment. We just saw 3 buses go past, and there'll be loads more in a minute. And everybody else will be trying to step between them to cross the road. Like that.
Hey, how you doing? Okay? How you been? You alright? You doing okay?
Sorry, he's one of the local evangelists, and he always sends me greetings in the name of Jesus, but it's a bit tricky when I have to remove his voice from the soundtrack. Anyway, this is Carfax Tower, unmistakable silhouette. This is the end of the high street, and I'm going to go to Sainsbury's and get my food for tomorrow. So this is the end of my video in which I found the seed sculpture. See you next time.